Hey Radicals! The following is a clip from my brand new interview with Ray McGovern on the very first episode of PRIMO RADICAL Uncensored on Rockfin. For the full 2-hour interview, please go to rockfin.com.
I think that there's a misunderstanding or a lack of understanding of how close we are to becoming embroiled in a real major nuclear exchange with Russia. So I think we have to stay alert and obey what Ike told us to do, and that is what you're doing and what I'm doing, trying to create a well-informed citizenry so that we can spread to our co-citizens some measure of truth, despite what they hear from BSNBC and from CNN and from Fox.
It's a good name. Well, I did have several patron questions for you, and this is kind of like a lightning round, so we don't have to go too in depth with these. But the first one here says, "Do you think Cy Hirsch is still trustworthy? Why or why not?"
Absolutely trustworthy.
Next one says, "Did your criticism of the military-industrial complex start only after the fall of the Soviet Union, or did you see unnecessary war provocation before that?"
I guess simple explanation is that as an intelligence analyst, I was not called or even permitted to criticize things going on here in this country. I was less aware of the situation, that's sure. But I retired early enough so that I learned a hell of a lot since, and that's why I'm more outspoken these days.
Next question, where would you draw the line between what should be secret and what should not?
I would advocate for pundits and newspaper people and cable news networks just to tell the truth. They publicize sensitive information when they're told to. Tell them not to be afraid if somebody honest gives some real intelligence information. It's quite a courageous thing these days to whistleblow. When there is a whistleblower, they need to jump all over it and make sure it gets out into the air. The way things are structured now, with the 6 major networks, or whatever you call them, owned by the people who profiteer on war, it's not likely to happen anytime soon, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't keep trying.
What's the most concise way to explain the DNC HRC email leaks to a RussiaGate believer?
I would ask them to download the testimony of Sean Henry, head of CrowdStrike, who says that there is no technical evidence that anyone hacked into the DNC for those particular emails, that there's no evidence that Russia or anyone else hacked in, and the only other way it could have been gotten by WikiLeaks is by somebody plugging a thumb drive or some sort of external storage device into a computer, putting it in their pocket, getting on a plane, and going to wherever WikiLeaks was publishing this information. That's what we said all along. We were ostracized, we were ridiculed. Turns out we were true. All you need to do is download Sean Henry's testimony, and I hope you can find it. If not on Google, look on DuckDuckGo.
Well, actually, right, I don't know if you saw this. DuckDuckGo also announced that they're going to be flagging Russian disinformation and deranking it. Yeah, that was a big announcement that they made in the first couple of weeks. So
then I would correct that. I would say go to raymcgovern.com. That's my website. And my son, who's my webmaster, always criticizes me because I always forget to mention it. raymcgovern.com.
So next question, what are your thoughts on the recent admission from the New York Times that the Hunter Biden laptop story was true all along? That's from Bardicus Maximus.
That sends me up the wall. I mean, my God, have they no shame? I mean, I'm glad they finally mentioned it. I acknowledged it. I'm glad the Post, the Washington Post.
Yeah, I believe today the Post actually admitted it as well.
Yeah. But my God, here it is, a campaign, and the press is going to determine who wins the presidency. Now, I'm not sure we can say determine, but certainly affect.
Yeah, interfered directly.
And I found that unconscionable. I'll make a little confession here. I mentioned earlier what I thought of Donald Trump. The last thing I wanted was him to win another term, right? I had my kids and my grandkids and my wife and everybody else really wondering what I was going to do with this Biden laptop thing. Oh my God. I mean, it seemed genuine. There were all kinds of signs that it was genuine, and it was not beyond the New York Times or the Washington Post to hide it all, or George Stephanopoulos not even to ask the president about it at the height of all this stuff. So what did I decide to do? I didn't write about it. Glenn Greenwald, to his credit, did. And he had to quit the institution that he had founded. So clap for Glenn Greenwald. I feel a bit ashamed. Well, not ashamed. I guess you have to keep peace in the family. And I don't know who would have been worse, Trump or Biden. I think, well, I don't know, but that's academic. So what I'm saying here is this is unconscionable. And it's not the first time in recent history. Let me take one more second and say, James Risen, who used to be a pretty good investigative reporter for the New York Times, found out in the summer of 2004 that George Bush and Dick Cheney had allowed the telecoms and the NSA to collect all our telephone calls and other communications against the Fourth Amendment, pure and simple. James Risen went to his betters at the New York Times and says, oh, I've got this incredible story, that they're spying on all of us. And the New York Times, and they said, well, let's keep this under wraps. He said, why? Well, there's an election coming up in November. He said, yeah, it's July. Well, we talked to the White House and they say, this would endanger sources and methods and we wouldn't catch the terrorists. So could you just, James Risen acquiesces, Bush wins the election, and a year later, James Risen has a book in which he tells the whole story. A year later, so we're talking 2005, he goes to his betters at the New York Times and he says, you should know that my book is in galley, and I have that story about them spying on all of us. I'm getting paid big bucks for you guys. It'll look a little strange if if we don't put it in a newspaper. I said, no, don't do that. And Sulzberger, head of the Times, and the Washington bureau chief go into the White House again. Bush says, no, endangering sources of method. You can't do this. And Sulzberger says, but we waited 16 months already. I mean, it's going to be too embarrassing, but I have to do it. You have to understand. I don't understand. He went out. Well, a week later, they did publish the story. Now, all I'm saying is, if that story had come out when it should have, when all that stuff that later appeared in the book was already available to James Risen, well, maybe we wouldn't have to deal with 4 more years of George Bush, okay, and Dick Cheney. That's big. And so I did a lecture at one point at the Oxford Forum, and on the other side of the lecture thing was the executive director of the New York Times at the time. So I had a little bit of a field day exposing that to the rest of the people there at Oxford Union, and they were singularly unimpressed.
What are your thoughts on sanctions against Chinese leadership?
I'd ask why. I think they're crazy. I think the fact that we identified China as our major enemy is crazy. Why can't we live and let live? What's wrong with the Chinese expression, win-win? Well, what's wrong, I guess, is that we can't double the amount of ships in our naval fleet and have defense contractors make more money. I mean, it doesn't compute. The Chinese, in my view, are no threat to us unless we decide to be a threat to them. They're doing those islands and they're protecting Taiwan, and they're not going to stand still for independence for Taiwan. That would be a red flag for them. That would be a red line. So leave them alone, for God's sake. Leave Russia alone. And you'd be surprised how much of that 782 billion with a B that we spend on defense this year, and what Biden is asking for more than 800 billion for next year. How much of that could be put to useful sources like building schools and building hospitals and helping people not go hungry, and health insurance, all those things. What we need to do is get out in the streets and make sure that the people that are profiteering on these kinds of arms, I'll just say one more thing. Pope Francis is better than most popes. I don't agree with everything he says, but when he did come to Congress and speak before a joint session, it was only, 2015, so 7 years ago. And he said, look, the main problem is the blood-drenched arms traders. Now, what did those senators and representatives do? They got up, Pope, way to go, Pope! And they looked into their pockets for the last check from Lockheed and one over here from Raytheon. And I mean, it might have slipped out when they were clapping. And I mean, it was giving hypocrisy a bad name. I mean, hello, that's the Pope is right on that. Okay, he's more right on that than other things he says. The main problem is the blood-drenched arms trade. Ike said that himself. Are we powerless with what limited liberties we have left to us? Are we powerless to go to the people who profiteer from these blood-drenched arms trade? I'd like to think that people could put their bodies into it. I mean, that's what it's going to take. You have to make sure these people are conscientized, that they're given some flesh to warn them. Look, this is not okay. This has happened before in history. It's really doing our country in. You got to stop it. And by and large, if people put their bodies into it, I think change can happen. It has happened before.
Well, Ray, I really do appreciate you being on the very first episode of Uncensored. Thank you again for going 2 hours here. It was very enlightening. For folks out there who would like to follow you and stay up to date with you, how can they do that?
Well, the easiest way is to go on my website. I'm glad you mentioned that. RayMcGovern.com. Everything I write and most of the things that I do in the way of interviews and speeches are on there, or find their way on there eventually. So that's the easiest way to do that. And I also have some my Twitter handle and my an email that can reach me. So thanks for having me on, Primo. You're, as usual, well prepared, and it was fun chatting with you and your folks.
Thank you, everyone, for watching. And again, if you'd like to see the full 2-hour interview, please go to rockfin.com. That's ROKFIN.com, and search for Primo Radical.